Right, this is definitely a topic that's been getting a lot of discussion in the last year, last couple of years, but
What have
especially the
you
last year.
seen happening between men and women right now?
Women, I think, don't need men as
Okay.
much as they used to. And I think this is in part because of the whole sexual revolution and the pill and the feminism and all these things, which has tremendous upsides. I think that women and men are.
Okay, so you can see where this is going. Why this is title of this video, and I'll link it below, is from the diary of a CEO. These are just clips that he has. He's got a lot of super long, like hours long content. And then the other guy he's interviewing, the Indian guy from India, he's the HealthyGamerGG YouTube channel, and I watch a lot of his stuff too.
Of having less sex, they're getting married less. Men's attitude towards women has become a little bit more resentful in certain pockets of the internet. They perceive
Sure.
relationships with the other sex to be disposable more than ever before.
Men's view.
Yeah, now I've talked about this a lot. The reason why the disposable is going to be there is because everybody can or should be able to survive on their own and form their own household. Although we're also suddenly realizing that that's almost becoming impossible without roommates. Huh, weird.
You women.
I would say both. And I think in
Okay.
part that's because of dating apps, just the perception of choice.
Okay.
The feeling that if you don't work out, there's another 1,000 people on my phone that I could give a shot to. I think the equation of a relationship, when we think about the investment it takes for it to work and what you get from it, people now perceive the equation not to be worth it.
Okay. I think there's a lot of great stuff there. So you're like
His name's Dr. K. This guy from India, the Healthy Gamer GG is Dr. K.
a fully formed adult man, right?
I think so. I hope
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Like you're like a man. You're
Thank you.
not like a kid. You're not like a dude in early stages of development. You've got a career, you've got a relationship, you're buying a house. Like you are an adult.
Yeah.
So if I was an 18-year-old
Yeah.
and I came to you, and let's say I'm your nephew or something like that, and I'm like, Stephen, fully formed adult, handsome man in relationship,
I
I'm
like your whole
struggling to
accent there.
date.
Yeah.
What should I do?
You want me to give you
Yeah.
advice? Fuck. I think you should work on yourself,
Okay.
especially as an 18-year-old man, because I think you need to, especially at that age, create some advantages. And so working.
Yeah, okay. I would say definitely work on yourself. That's great advice. What I'm seeing is that men, for the most part, don't really have much to offer in the dating market until at least age 30. So I would say prepare people too. And I've talked to some people who are in their 30s, some guys who actually got that advice that, hey, don't worry so much, especially if you're going to have kids or a family, because women kind of their viable age for having babies that are healthy without complications is about 35. For men, it's usually 55, 60, or beyond. Okay, totally different timeline. Women are ahead of men now because they're graduating from school and college at higher rates. They're making more money when they do get into the workforce, and school is designed better for women. And of course, women are hypergamous, or at least they all claim to be, or most of them. So they want someone better. So the only way they're going to get that is by waiting. Um, the only way that women are going to get that is by the men waiting until they're like 35 to even start dating. And then, of course, you got to start dating someone younger if you want to have pregnancies without complications. I know this isn't what people have been told in the past, but that's the past. This is the present. And we're playing by a different set of rules now.
On yourself could be learning, reading, going to the gym, building up the ability to provide for someone else and to protect somebody else. That's kind of really where I'd start. And again, that's biased because that's what I did at 18 years old.
Great.
I actually didn't date. I think I've been on 5 dates in my entire life.
Okay. So let's say I do that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm like, hey, I'm on this growth journey. And
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Okay. Doesn't work means if that means he's not getting dates at 23, I wouldn't say that doesn't work. It depends on the message that was given to folks when this younger generation was being raised.
You've encountered this, and there are going to be people in the audience who are like, the reason they're watching this podcast is because they're trying to do that. They're still not getting dates, right?
Yeah.
It's still hard to find a girlfriend. Then what do you have to say to them?
I would assume that the reason it's not working is because they're not in this frame of mind to find
Perfect.
love.
And when someone says, when a dude says, I'm trying to do everything right, what is the most common response that they get? Right? So like,
Try harder or like,
yeah, right?
Okay, see, they're making it sound like this is a struggle, and I guess it is. If you are familiar with the term incel, it's involuntarily celibate, and so many men are like that in their 20s. The only men that really aren't incels in their 20s are like the top 5% of the dating pool, which has all the sixes that the women want, six-figure income. Actually, now it's probably 250,000 plus income, six pack, and 6 feet plus tall.
If you kind of like look at Twitter, what you'll find is people will be like, it's impossible to find a good woman. And then like men will be, and let's say a dude says that, or a woman says that. Doesn't
Oh, another thing too is these guys are just focusing on the United States, it sounds like, I'm guessing, or some kind of developed countries. There's also the passport bros phenomenon that's going on. And it's basically like, hey, if you are a 4 or a 5 over here in terms of a guy, and that's why you're not getting dates, you go over to Thailand and you're 8 or 9 suddenly. Okay. And it's a lot cheaper there too. So you get through a lot of financial hurdles.
it's on both sides. It's impossible to find a good man. And then people won't be like, yeah, it's impossible to find a good man. So maybe some people will be supportive. So you'll have a woman who says it's impossible to find a good man. You know, there are a lot of people who are like, yeah, like men are trash. Fine. And then a lot of people will be like, you're not trying hard enough. You're not going to the right places. That gets, we as men get that a lot more because there's a societal bias that men don't need help, right? So if you look at like the comparison of scholarships, male only scholarships versus female only scholarships, there's about $4.9 billion worth of scholarships given out in the United States from private sources. Female scholarships outside of athletics are way higher than male scholarships.
Okay, now that's probably been traditionally that way. And it's kind of one of those things where they were trying to shift the pendulum in the other direction because there weren't enough women in higher education, but now there's more women than men, and that should have already changed by now, but I'm guessing it hasn't.
So if you look at athletics, the number is way higher for men. But the really weird thing is that like 60% of people who graduate from college or in college somewhere in there
Right.
are women. So
Yep.
the people who need more gender-based support are men, but we don't really do that. We're usually like if a man has a problem, this is a man's problem to solve.
Okay, keep in mind, I'm 55, so I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so I was around during that time when those kind of incentives made sense, but not anymore, not in 2025. Who who decides when those get turned off?
Solve. And when a man goes out and says, I'm having trouble dating, but what people will say is men will say, work harder, try harder. You know, people will and people will really be nasty about it. They're like, do you not know how to talk to women? Stop being a creep, things like that. And then the other thing that we're sort of starting to, not starting, we're really seeing is that there is like this very, very like deep anger, entitlement. There's like this incel movement.
There you
There's
go.
this like alpha male, beta male kind of thing. And I don't know if you kind of get this, but there's like a deep sense of like anger, right? There's like
If you want to read that stuff, I'm going to link the video. It's down below in the description, and you should go subscribe. I subscribe to this channel. It's definitely worthwhile.
in men, and I think women feel it too. This is why women are so terrified. This whole thing about would you rather be in a forest with a bear or a man? Did you hear about this?
no.
So
I've heard
like
about
people would
this.
ask this question on Twitter to women. It's like, would you rather be in a forest with like a bear or a man? And like,
Sorry, yeah, yeah. The bear you think is scarier, but actually, my wife would likes bears anyway, so she would probably always choose a bear. It doesn't seem that dramatic to me, but to you, wait till you hear what he says. I'm sure you know what he's going to say now.
like women feel safer with a wild bear than they do with a man. So I think people are picking up on this like existential, and I don't know if that makes sense to you, but there's like an existential like cry coming from men, which can manifest as anger. I think we're also seeing reflections of this like in South Korea with like dropping birth rates, right? Where like
Oh,
men are
that's
getting
another
really,
one.
really angry. They feel
Not just South Korea, everywhere. The only people having kids right now, it seems like, are the poor and the ultra wealthy. Now, I'm talking about, net worth wise. That's who seems to be having most kids. Anywhere in the middle, which there's no real middle class, but anymore, but that's where most people are, and they're just hardly having any children at all. So, yeah.
really entitled. And I think this is where it's important to understand a biological difference, and we'll get to what I think is going on. So a woman does not need a man in order to pass her genes along, right? So I mean, like literally, I know it sounds weird, but like if you're a woman, you can just go to a sperm bank and you can get pregnant.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
can just have
I know I knew somebody who was around that age, 35, right, and not no prospects, and that's what she was going to do. And yeah, that's definitely something that can be done very easily these days.
a child without. You can also argue that it's easier for women to find a man who is willing to impregnate them than it is for a man to find a woman willing to carry their child. But I mean, literally, we live in a society where women can just procreate if they feel like it, and men cannot. So there's a fundamental power
Mm.
balance there. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it
Yeah, yes, but also, as you're probably well aware, one man can simultaneously, or at least he can get many women pregnant on one day. So in a week, he could impregnate 50 or 100 different women. Uh, I know that's not part of this discussion, but just making sure that's included.
is what it is. So I think what we're starting to see is actually like a mass extinction event. We are seeing
Oh,
natural selection for a group of men who have no options. Men
okay, that's a good point. And one of the reasons why this has become so prolific recently is because of social media, because everybody, it's fake book. Everything's not real. It's a curated life of only the good parts, and everything is not really who you are anymore. And because of that, everyone's standards are so high, especially women, especially because they're always trying to be hypergamous. They expect damn near perfection, or they're not going to move forward, or and or they'll be in a constant state of depression if they don't get that.
many years ago, I was a loser, and the world that we lived in necessitated my entry into third spaces. I had trouble talking to girls, but I was forced into college.
Yeah.
When I got my first job, it was serving ice cream. I was forced to interact with girls. I was active in a summer camp where I met girls, was forced to talk to girls. So I sucked at talking to girls, but the world that I lived in was structured so that I still had to talk to girls. I had no option to retreat from interaction and painful interaction with the opposite.
Okay. Yeah, that is true for sure. You had to go meet somebody in person at an actual place back in the day. I mean, back in the day, there was no internet. Back in the day, there was no cell phones. Back in the day, if you wanted to talk to somebody on the phone, you knew where they were because they were plugged into a wall. If I ran a business, the only way I could talk to my customers if I wasn't around to talk with them directly in person at their property was that they would leave a message on my answering machine. I would call them back eventually once I got back there and got on the answering machine. So I would say this is important because what's happened now is what was mentioned in the Matrix movie. Men just plug into the Matrix. That's what they do. Sit in their gaming chair, put on their gaming headset, and there's this whole nonstop 24/7 world of activity that they can participate in, and no one's going to stop them from participating in that or tell them no.
Opposite sex. I think literally what we're seeing, because all this stuff started to get really bad during COVID.
Mhm.
So what happened in COVID was actually like a natural selection event, but it wasn't a natural selection event about life and death. That's what people think natural selection is. What happened during COVID, sure, a lot of people died and that's bad. But the post-COVID world, some people were able to adapt to it and some people are not. We're seeing a spike in social anxiety. Now I can work from home. Now I have pornography. Now I have all this stuff going on to where
Always
I'm
had
not
porn.
forced to learn how to interact with women. Does that kind
Yeah, there's no skills that are required in relationships. And that's fine, but you don't want to get left behind if that's the way it's going because all that opportunity is there to interact without in person being needed. You can make giant amounts of money or you can get totally left behind, both financially and relationship wise, if you just rest on your laurels.
of makes
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
So now you can live your whole life at home. And I think what's starting to happen
Mhm.
is literally natural selection. And the way that
Mm.
natural selection works is people think it's like, oh, if natural selection means I'm weak and someone is strong. That's not technically correct. Natural selection is you were made a certain way, someone else is made a different way, and then the environment changes. Which one of these two is suited to, it's not even adaptation because all the adaptations have been made. And I think the best example of this is like literally Darwin's finches. So you've got like, one finch that has like a hard beak that can crack a nut. You've got another finch that has a very sharp beak that can get like a bug out of like a cactus, like that has these very like tight flowers. And so if something happens and all the cacti die out, the birds that rely on the cacti bugs will start to die out too. They don't know how to procreate in this world anymore. And I think what we're seeing with like all these alphas, betas, incels, what we're seeing in South Korea is there is a whole generation of men that is like we are literally watching them die out in real time.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty thought-provoking at the very minimum. The other thing is people are also becoming more unhealthy who are sitting in their gaming chairs all day and they're eating whatever. So they are they're going to die out from natural selection from that too. Another factor here is that people are starting to live shorter lives. The life expectancy is dropping, and I'm sure this is a factor with it. You got to have some real social connections, I think, to make your life worth living and to make you want to keep going on, even if you're not, even that's not, even if that's not at the top of your mind. I think that's always a factor.
Because we've got 32-year-olds, 35-year-olds who do not have children, do not know how they're going to ever have children.
But that's women, okay? Women. If you're a woman and you're in there, you're panicking. And if you either got to go out and get IVF with some sperm donor, which you can do, like he's saying, or you're just not going to have kids. I think there's going to be a lot of women going forward. I know this is about men specifically, but another one of the fallouts here is the women are going to be so picky. They're going to wait. They're going to wait. Oh, too late. Can't have kids anymore. Waited too long. The men still have plenty of time, like another couple of decades potentially, to father children and not die off. The women are the ones who uh, I don't know what they're going to do with their money when they die, but in terms of their genetic line may die off more so than the men, I believe. I'm not sure why he's talking like this.
And this is where, like, I know this sounds bizarre, but so that's actually happening. That's not bizarre. That's birth rate in South Korea is like 0.7. So there's a bunch of
World's lowest
men who
fertility
will
rate
never
in
pass on their
South Korea.
genes
Yeah.
in the alpha male, beta male, whatever. Like, in that kind of language, they talk a lot about like procreation and legacy and
By the way, if you all don't know, there are plenty of situations of different countries that are below replacement rate that are offering financial incentives for you to move there. And states in the US. I mean, I'm talking about like Italy in Europe. I'm talking about like West Virginia in the United States and other places. Okay. And then some people will even give you money for having children. Okay. And you have to fulfill the requirements. But these are the incentives that are starting to pop up.
stuff like that. But I almost wonder, is there a mechanism in a human being that if your genes know they're dying out, what would they trigger in your mind?
But see, there you go. I would agree. That is important. Now, let me also, this video that I'm commenting on here and providing insight on and reacting to is about why 60% of men give up on women. I would say it's closer to 80. I'd say the 80-20 principle is kind of a universal thing. And that would be more like 80, because only 20% of the men are really going to be attractive to women. And again, remember that once those 20% of men hit 35, 40, 45, and they're super attractive to women, they're not going to be attractive to women in their generation because those women will no longer be able to have kids, probably not without major problems. So they're going to be going for a younger generation of women. This is going to become much more normalized as time goes on, in my opinion.
Right? And I think what they would trigger is exactly what we're seeing. This like existential panic, angst, even aggression, entitlement. Because if these men do not behave in this way, they're literally going to die out. So what we see in this post-COVID world is that people like maybe you or me who were like losers and didn't know how to talk to chicks in high school, we were forced into social.
I like what he says, whether it's true or not, I don't know, that he taught himself all these social skills that he has now. And I'm similar. I was probably way worse off than he was from my starting point. But anybody can do that, especially nowadays with the internet. All this stuff can be learned.
Interaction where we basically like that's where we developed in order to so that we could talk to girls. But in this post-COVID world, all those spaces are gone. There's no
Well, there are some, but now they're online. And I know everyone's dating profile has pictures from 10 years ago. That's almost always how that goes That's why you got to cross-reference them with their current social media, so you know if they're lying. But there are still some third spaces out there, maybe not in person, um, but even so, yeah, there's a problem, but there's also opportunity.
Forcible interaction. So then there are some people for whom it's natural to talk to girls. And that's why like we see this dichotomy where it's almost like, some people like just put yourself out there, just work out, work on yourself and things will work out. And then there are a lot of other people who are like, that's not working. And I imagine if you went
Well,
back,
again,
like,
that depends on their age. If you're talking about not working, if there's a guy who's 24 and wondering why this isn't working, well, of course, he's not even mentioning Dr. K. I'm surprised is not mentioning the concept of hypergamy here, because now if that same guy who's 24, if it was still not working for him when he was 39, then I'd be concerned. My guess is it'll be working just fine when he's 39. He'll probably have made a much wiser choice. Everybody all around, if he just waits till he's 39, because you also hear how they say women are develop and become more mature faster than men, and maybe it is true because maybe it should be like that because their fertility window is just dramatically shorter than men. Oops, sorry about that.
200 years, went back to the Galapagos Islands and you took Darwin's finches and you put them on Twitter, you would see exactly what we're seeing. Some people are like, oh, like you have trouble getting bugs? Just crack a nut. Like, just get better at cracking nuts. But they have something in their makeup, something in their attachment style, something in their tendency for social anxiety, something in.
Okay, I agree with what he's saying, but again, I don't know why he's skipping over this age issue that I keep bringing up. Men just have to wait. Build what you can in the young years. Just acknowledge that you're not going to get what you want early on. And with age comes wisdom too. This is all good, if you ask me. Good things come to people who wait.
In their neuroticism, something in their circumstances, something in their support structure that allows them to put forth effort and succeed. And then there are these other people over here who will go to therapy, who will work on themselves professionally, who will show up on dating apps. And because of the shape of their face, which cannot be fundamentally altered, or some other thing which they're not even aware of,
Okay.
they grew.
He's talking about like the 1% or the 5% of men who can just have any woman they want, because they have this incredible look. They got the sixes, like I said, too, or they're the bad boy and they got the look. A lot of it is so much about the look. I think he's mentioned before, Dr. K, from like the shoulders up, like me, okay? So much depends on that. And you can't really change that. I get it. But your actual age and your accomplishments and your maturity can and will make up for that when some woman is ready, especially a woman who's ready to settle down and have children, as opposed to someone who's just looking for a good time.
Grew up with a certain attachment style that they're not aware of. They grew up with on the spectrum, and their capacity to make eye contact and emotional connections is very difficult. So there's this whole crop of people who I think are trying really hard. I don't think they're losers. I don't think they're like pathetic or anything like that. I think there's something about the architecture of how these people are built so that standard advice does not apply to them. And what I feel when I sit with these people is like some.
Okay, realize he helps a lot of people. He coaches, or he's a psychologist, I believe. So he is definitely helping people and gaining. He's talking from his own personal experience working with others.
Someone who is dying out. Like that's what it feels like to sit with. This person's life, they're not living a life. They're in a slow, protracted process of dying. And when you are in a slow, protracted process of dying, pornography shows up. And then you've got this weird thing that goes on where you get this spurt of dopamine, this existential dread of like, I am not getting to participate in life. There are all these people out there.
Okay, let me also interject here and say that I'm an optimist, okay? So here's how I would look at this. Yeah, it's bad. Pornography is bad. It's going to make, on one part of this pornography equation, it's going to make the men's expectation of the women that are out there to be damn near perfect, okay? So that's a problem, all right? So they may not, their expectations may be too high. The other thing is they may not have any practical experience having sex with people, okay? But again, you could also use that as a learning tool. Not to say that I'd say you should ever use it at all right? But I'm saying you could use it as a learning tool to learn about all the different types of positions and expectations and lengths of whatever and everything. You could do all that, or you could just try for cheap dopamine hits. There's two different ways to do it.
There that are participating, they tell me, oh, you should do this, but it doesn't work. And it's just imagine how terrifying it is. If someone gives you advice that's supposed to work and it doesn't work for you, how fucked are you? Right? Because that's the answer. It's like some people have cancer, we give them cancer treatment, they get better. But
Oh,
if some people have
let
cancer
me
and
stop right there. Yes, follow the advice of your doctor. I'm not giving medical advice, but the medical system doesn't ever say they will be able to heal anything, including cancer. That's a non-communicable disease, and you can fix that through your habits and lifestyle. This guy probably just doesn't know enough. I would not make that analogy here.
everyone's like, hey, do this chemotherapy, and it doesn't work, then how screwed are you? You're very screwed. So this is, I think, what we're seeing, this deep existential loss, this desire for connection is somehow like intersecting with pornography. Because I think pornography addiction has a spiritual component too. And if you talk to people who are addicted to pornography, they can feel it. They feel like spiritual.
Okay, yeah, I get it. Like I said, you can actually, even though I'm not recommending it, have a practical use for it. But when you have learned what you need to learn, then move on. And do not have it as a crutch. That's for sure. It'll interfere with your relationships. I would say in most cases, it's not going to be good.
Like empty. They're like, I'm not doing anything with my life. So one of the two variables that correlates with pornography addiction, the two strongest variables that correlate with pornography addiction, one of them is a sense of meaninglessness in life. And there's a weird spiritual angle that I talked about, but the other is really.
Well, again, that's only if you don't see another way out. My guess is he's talking about guys in their 20s or younger. If you're past 35 and you're addicted to porn and you're successful, or past 40 for sure, then I would be highly concerned. Okay. But until we get to that point, he's got to make that differentiation with the different ages here, I believe.
Simple thing is, if you want to stop watching porn, you need to have a reason to stop watching porn. And the problem with porn is that you can be kind of like living your life. And then in the in-between hours, when you're like back from work and before you go on a date, or maybe you're swiping on Tinder and no one's really answering or whatever, like you just have these hours in the day where there's nothing going on. You're not living for anything. So you might as well jerk off.
I mean, there's a lot that I'm thinking about. The first is, if we go back up to your point about this being a bit of an extinction event, it poses a question about like, what do you do about that?
Mm-hmm.
You said also people are trying to implement the advice, but it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that mean
another facet to this is he talking about the potential extinction of introverts, where extroverts are going to take over? He didn't bring that up, but that's another factor here, if you ask me.
that that's a question of like motivation, discipline? Is it bad advice? What do we do there? And the third, I guess, question that comes to mind is, does society have a responsibility to intervene in some way to correct this?
So I think, does society have a responsibility? I don't.
Oh my gosh. Let me just say that I don't think society, whatever that means, has any responsibility to intervene here any more than they do the entire degenerative systems of all society right now, which we are on a collision course with total destruction, if you ask me. It's not just this thing with men giving up on women.
I don't think that is a real thing. So I have never seen society take a responsibility. I don't think society can take a responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if like how do I get society? Like, who do I talk to?
But if you think about other people that are in marginalized groups, society intervenes to make the
Who is
world,
society?
the governments, and the way that we make our laws, and the way that we give out money and grants, and the way that we shape our communities.
Yeah, so I understand the question, but I think like this, and this is just the way that I think. So if I ask you what is society, you say the government. And then who is the government? What is the government? It's people.
Yeah.
So I think this comes down to, forget about societal responsibility. And I think this is one of the problems, not to say that it is the problem, but this is just the way that I think. there was a case, I don't remember her name, of a woman who's being sexually assaulted in public, like on a street at nighttime. And there were a bunch of neighbors who were like aware that the sexual assault was happening, and no one called for help. And
Okay, now that, yeah, of course, they are practically uh, involved in that crime based on the way he described it, I'd say.
the reason no one called for help is because everyone assumed that somebody else would call for help.
Oh my gosh.
Whose problem is it? Oh, society should fix this. And the moment that we say society should fix this, we stop taking individual responsibility.
Yeah.
And the moment that we stop taking individual responsibility, like unless someone shows up and runs for office and says, my goal is to do this, which by the way is happening in like South Korea. So like conservatives that are very like, there's this huge tension in South Korea right now between men and women, and this 4B movement where women are like, we're not going to have kids anymore. And then there's like this conservative kind of like pro-masculine kind of movement that is moving into government and says like, this needs to change. And we see governments responding to this mating crisis. Right. So I think like China is now paying people to have children. So there's all kinds of like moves that are happening. So is it society's responsibility? Like, I don't know. So I think if society doesn't do anything, what's going to happen will be really simple. And that's what I mean by we're witnessing a mass extinction event. We have a group of young men who are somewhere between 15 to 50 who will just never procreate.
Okay. 15 to 50 that will never procreate. Now, even the people at 50 can probably still procreate as long as they haven't wasted their lives living in their parents' basement at 50 years of age. Am I right? Let me know down there in the comments. I think if you have your own life, your own home, you're autonomous, you're independent, that's very attractive to women at 50. And you could probably find someone who really wants to have kids at 25. So I don't agree with what he's saying. If someone decides in advance that they're not going to procreate, like he's saying, I guess they're not. But they're not getting all the information, I think. I wish somebody would tell them. Maybe, if you know somebody out there who fits this description, send them this video, please.
And then they will literally die out, right? Their genes will not be passed on. And for the people who do procreate, they will have been adapted to the post-COVID world.
Yeah.
Right? So they know how to form, they succeed on Tinder. Whereas like if you go and you look at like, if you go to like some kind of senior event and you look at all the people who have grandkids, half the men there would not have succeeded on Tinder.
Yeah.
Right? And this is something that really like shocked.
That's a great point that he brings up there. Yeah, they wouldn't have, but they did anyway. And now the formula he's giving isn't that complicated. The problem is he's leaving out the advantage with wealth building, with net worth increasing over time, and men's age increasing, and the pendulums in the dating market swinging towards them rather than towards women, because women peak in the dating market at like 21, 22. And so the pendulum starts swinging down. They're working on their career. Then they wait till the last second and they're way low on the desirability in the dating market. So if there's a woman who really wants kids, her peak is 21, 22. If there's a man who really wants kids, no matter how bad or awkward he is with social, he can learn that over decades. Just wait till you're at least 40. How about that? And you'll have plenty to choose from, in my opinion.
Shocks people when I kind of tell them this, but if you want to see like who's succeeding, it's not the dudes on Tinder who are getting laid 15 times. Like go to like I mean, this is sometimes a little creepy, but like if you go to a playground, you're going to see like a lot of like average looking men with like average looking dad bods, which with average median incomes, who are like having kids. And that's what's really happening. But even those men are adapted in some way, right? Because they're not exceptionally attractive, they're not exceptionally rich, but they have something going on in their psychological makeup which allows them to form bonds and procreate.
Okay, if Dr. K is saying that the men that are not going to procreate have serious psychological problems that they apparently can't do anything about, then I guess he may be right. And they may be right. You're a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You either can or you can't, depending upon how you think. But But then if there's always people with serious psychological problems that he's talking about, why? Why do they have serious psychological problems? I've made other videos and content where I say that, psychological issues are going to be normal. That's acceptable in a society that's crumbling like ours. So I really don't see the alarm being sounded in a correct way here, in my opinion.
You just said that a huge amount of men between the age of 15 and 50 will not pass on their genes. They will effectively die out of the gene mating pool. So people will hear that, and many people will go, well, that's evolution.
Yeah.
But I want to understand if there's a counterpoint to that. Should society intervene? Why is, in the short term, we're going to have a lot of men who are disillusioned, that become incels, find themselves in pockets of the internet, are resentful, all those kinds of things. But
Yeah, in the short term, like he says, we will see that. Like men in their 20s, I would say that almost everybody's like that, should be like that, because if you're going to hook up and connect and have a long-term relationship with a girl, a woman in that time in your 20s, either you're filthy rich, like a billionaire, or you've settled for something that you probably don't want anyway. Hopefully you're going to react well to that, but you understand what I'm saying. Hopefully they're not saying that. It surprises me that these guys are not saying that.
should society intervene to course correct that? Should we put systems in place to make sure
So
that those men meet partners?
I'm gonna answer that question with a question.
Okay.
If, let's say, a huge swath of people are dying out from cancer,
Yeah.
should we intervene with that?
Yes.
If a huge swath of people are dying out from
Okay, intervene with a lot of people dying of cancer. The problem is, if you leave it up to society, like they're saying, society's already given you an answer to cancer. And apparently there's no cure and they're constantly searching for it, even though those in the know already realize there is an answer to that. So this analogy is not good. It leaves me a very bad taste in my mouth right now.
like a virus, should we intervene with that?
100%. Yes.
If a huge swath of people are dying out from genocide, should we intervene with that?
Yes.
So I think there are two important things. One
It's
is
slightly
that
different though, isn't it?
it
Because
is.
it's
So,
whether you.
so one is about death,
Yeah.
right? So one is like if a human being is dying,
Mhm.
we should step in. But natural selection isn't necessarily about death. This is what's really tricky about it. This is why I think it gets hard. Natural selection is about passing on your genes.
Yeah.
Right? It's about creating viable offspring.
Yeah, and
And
he's
this is
I'm trying to get him, he's not blinking. He's talking about natural selection as if you have to do that. That you have to pass on your own genes. Like he's saying, what about there's plenty of kids that are up for adoption. You can also, women can reproduce through sperm banks. Men, during these highly fertile younger years when they can't get a good woman, can donate to sperm banks. They could pass along their genes that way. It's not like we live in a time where they're not going to be able to pass on their genes if they don't want to. They can. Now whether they can raise that child in their own household, that's different, but still that's not necessarily required to pass on your genes, right?
this is where if someone, and I think we also say yes, like if there's, a couple that wants to have a child and that child has cystic fibrosis, should we help that couple? Should we help a couple procreate? We also say yes.
Yeah.
So that's why we have IVF and things like that. So I think that the tricky thing about the reason that this is different is because that's a couple. If a woman is unable to have kids, even if we say if a man is unable to have kids, should we medically intervene so that they're capable of having kids? Yes. Right? So if we're talking about
But he forgets the part where these incels can donate sperm. If they're using porn and whacking off all day, they could get paid for it. Okay, I'm just saying, like, why aren't they talking about this part? If you're talking about all the rest of the parts, why aren't they discussing that part?
a couple, if we're talking about a human being and there's a medical problem, or if we're talking about protecting people from death, the answer is yes. This is a new question, which is do people have the right, and I don't know if right is, maybe that's the right word, to reproduce? And this is what's so challenging about it is
Right to reproduce. I think they do in the way I just explained the alternative ways that can be done.
like the answer is basically no, because for men,
What?
That requires the
Okay.
consent of someone else. And my right to
No, donate to a
reproduce
sperm bank.
never trumps someone's right to not want to reproduce with me.
Yeah.
I think we sort of accept that, right? That's correct. Now,
In
this
fact,
is where the fundamental
in
biological difference
traditional
comes in. Because a woman
relationship
doesn't
roles,
need a man to reproduce. I can go to a sperm bank. And once again, you can argue that you can get laid if you want to, but
he keeps forgetting who's donating the sperm. Who is donating the sperm? Why does he forget about this? I don't know.
that hasn't been my experience. I think women struggle with loneliness and finding sexual partners and stuff
I guess,
quite a bit
okay.
as well.
He's saying the woman, I guess, without saying it, he's saying the woman will be able to raise a child that that has her genes in it. And the man, he can have a child that will have his genes biologically. He just almost certainly won't be able to raise that child, but he didn't say it in that way. He should have specified, if you ask me.
There's some really bad perception on the internet. So I think this is like a new problem for society, which is why it hasn't been solved. Now, that's why the track that I take, I don't know what the societal answer is. I'm not a sociologist. So what I have found, thankfully, we don't need to solve, or I don't think we need to solve that problem. Does it need to be solved? Sure. Should someone solve it? I think so. But I think what I found works really well is that usually the problem that these men are failing to adapt to can be fixed. But the problem is that the solutions that work for the people who are successful will not work for the people who are unsuccessful.
Whoa, whoa. That's a big statement. And he has neglected to talk about the advantage that comes with advancing years for men. And I mean, look, I'm 55. I could, I have biological children. I'm married a second time at this point. Hopefully, the final time, I believe, to Denise. We're not having kids, at least we're not planning on it. But I still could have a kid. And I could have waited this whole time since my birth in 1970 to even start trying. And I would probably have the best chance now of maybe raising the type of child that I would like to have in the exact type of environment I would like to have had I waited this long. With women, it's the opposite. They can't wait that long. I don't know why this isn't part of this discussion. It should be.
These are apples and oranges, right? So like, and this is the big mistake, is that when I say, okay, I am happily married with 2 kids, but the thing that I did won't work for these people. That's been my clinical experience. My advice does not work for them.
I would agree. I agree with what he's saying. So so he's expecting, well, because they didn't follow my advice and it won't work for them, they're screwed. No, they just need to take a different path. And the path that I described about waiting, build your life and wait, that is the alternative. I cannot believe he's not. And I'd be more concerned about women dying off than men. Unless he thinks that, and I guess it could be that all these childless single women, well, the thing is, if they think they're going to get a guy and have a guy, they may just wait too long. I think a lot of them are going to wait too long, right? Especially with all the years in school and paying back all the student loans and high stress career. But they could have babies, but they're going to have babies at 29 alone when they still have maybe another 5 years to still look around. I think women are going to end up with the short end of the stick on this one.
Your advice won't work for them. What we need is a different system that addresses their fundamental problems.
Okay.
Right? Because I had what it takes internally. I was loved as a child. Like this is how deep it runs. So I knew how to give love and receive love. A third of the men that I meet do not know how to give love and do not know how to receive love. Has nothing to do with their.
Don't you think that can be learned, though? Especially with the unlimited resources on the internet these days? I think that can be learned if it's important enough to someone.
Tinder profiles, that's why they're fucked. And when people can say, go to the gym, make more money, but if you do not know how to fundamentally give or receive love, then like that's a huge problem.
Is that
So he's saying that's permanent. I don't know.
Where you start when you're trying to solve this on an individual basis.
Yeah. So, I mean, I start giving and receiving love is not where I start because that's like so foreign to them that they don't know how to do that.
Okay.
Right. So, I think there are.
If someone has a desire to watch porn, I think they have some kind of understanding about how to give and receive love, if you ask me. Otherwise, I don't think that there'd be very low desire for that as well. They know on some level. That's what I think. I mean, I'm not in that business like he is. He's obviously, I think he is a psychologist and he is working with people one on one, and he knows the challenges. And they keep coming back to him to talk about more. So if they were to solve the problems, they wouldn't come back to him. There's a little bit of a perverse financial incentive there, if you ask me.
A couple of things. The first place that I start with most men is in understanding their emotions. So we have all kinds of patterns that we engage in that are driven by different parts of us that we have no insight into. And usually this is like where the money is. So I had a great conversation yesterday with a buddy of mine, and he gave me this fantastic example which I've seen so many times. So there's a lot of women will talk about men who are afraid of commitment.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's like, oh, like I'm dating this person, he's great, but he's afraid of commitment. He's afraid of commitment. And then it kind of becomes like, oh, like the dude is like, he like needs to step up and needs to like be a man and needs to like learn how to commit. So we sort of put the onus on the man. You're afraid of commitment. You need to fix that. It's a really funny thing is if you look at like women that I've worked with, they sort of fall into this pattern where they date men who are afraid of commitment. And that's why they're looking for commitment because they haven't found it yet, right? And so the really funny thing is sometimes women will select for a man who is afraid of commitment because deep down they're afraid of commitment.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that let's just end this on right here. That I think he's done talking about the important stuff. I think the reason why women would be afraid of commitment these days is because they're constantly seeing this barrage of content of men who they need to, and the dating apps, the ones that are getting all the attention. If you look at the dating apps and who gets clicked on instead of swiped left or right, or whatever, I can't remember what it is. I haven't been on dating apps in years. If you see which ones get selected versus the ones that are passed over, it's almost always the same thing. It's the sixes, like I was saying earlier, and they have such high standards. So they don't want to settle for somebody because that's the problem with women. When they finally settle, then a lot of them they feel resentment because they settled for some guy that they don't really want anyway, because they thought that's the best they could do. And it's not what they wanted. It's not hypergamy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a whole other discussion. We're not going to get into that now. But let me know what you think here and pass this along to somebody who could benefit. I definitely disagree with Dr. K on this, as you can tell. And although I agree with a lot of what he says, and I highly recommend you subscribe to his channel as well. I'll put both his channel and this Diary of a CEO, the exact link to this video if you want to watch it in its entirety. And let me know what you think. I think that men aren't screwed. I think, yeah, men are giving up on women in their 20s. That's how I would look at this. I'd say 80% of men have given up on women in their 20s. But the ones who realize it's just temporary, because for the reasons I stated earlier, they're going to benefit. So let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. Especially if you made this far, please give me a like and a subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.